Hello everyone, and welcome to part number 3 of the preview of the upcoming Massena milestone, which is one of the biggest patches we got so far for Warno. And in this video, after we went over the upcoming divisions in the previous two, we will now go over all the changes that come with this milestone, and there are a lot. First of them being, and biggest of them being the tank rework. As before this milestone, tanks in the current vanilla build are really rough, as PACT tanks are quite a bit more cost inefficient compared to NATO tanks. NATO tanks wipe the floor thanks to really good accuracy, which wasn't quite represented in their prices. So Eugen fixed that, and now tanks should be pretty equal between PACT and NATO. The playing field should be leveled, and we will go over it bit by bit. Keep in mind, this is still an alpha build. There might be some changes still to come, but in general, what you see here should be what you will get in the next update of the public build. And we start on the top with the T55, which is on 50 points now. And the T55 series being the only NATO pack tanks that went up a bit in price, at least the T55 AM2 and AM2B. The AM2 went up 5 points, the AM2B went up 10 points. I'm not quite sure why, though these are still pretty decent tanks, as the other, compared to most NATO tanks, they still got nerfed less than those. So I guess they still are somewhat capable. But I was a bit surprised. I guess it's because of the ATGM here that got pretty highly classified by Eugen, but yeah, that is the T55s. Now we come to tanks that got lower in price, as the T72 GM went down from 140 to 130 points, and the T72 GM went down 25 points from 185 to 160, whilst it was previously quite a bit more expensive than the M1 Abrams, for example. It now is cheaper than that one, so this tank now should be quite capable and should give the 7th Panzer Division of the NVR a quite good higher medium-end tank to deal with enemy armor. And this has an autoloader, and the armor penetration of the gun is pretty good, and the GM1 also has decent front and top armor, though the issue of the T72s is a bit the speed, and that the autoloader is not quite as fast as it is for the T80U and T80 series. And accuracy also can't quite compete with NATO tanks either. But yeah, with the buffed ones and also one additional card of T72 GMs, 7th Panzer now should be quite capable in fighting out tank battles. Meanwhile, now we come to the first NATO tanks, and here you can already see the first big nerf. Leopard 185 went from 80 to 100 points, and that is quite a change. Like, that's 1/4 more in price, so you get quite a few less of these onto the battlefield for the same amount of points. And though it's still a good tank, I mean, as you can see, it has great accuracy and good rate of fire, good speed, so it absolutely warrants this new price. And that is the first change. Leo 2A3 only got nerfed by 5 points, from 265 to 270, which I was a bit surprised by. I would expect it to still go up a bit more, as felt like it should go up to 180, I would say, would be a fair price. But we will see. Maybe this still might change, as this is by far the lowest nerf on the NATO side. So for a tank that most people complained about the most. But there have been some changes to the divisions that have this tank. The 2nd Panzer Grenadier lost 1 card of these, so there's still some nerfs to the West Germans regarding the Leopard 2A3 in the end. Then we have the M1 Abrams, which got the highest of all the nerfs. Went from 140, at which point it was super undervalued, to now 185, at which spot it is pretty balanced, getting relatively close to the T80 and the M1 IP now in points. 15 points cheaper than both of these now, but not 60 points cheaper. So yeah, it's still a fast tank. It still has a good gun with great accuracy, both in motion and static, and has a decent frontal armor that makes it somewhat hard to kill for Leos, and also helps out against T-72s and co. So it's for sure warrants its price, but yeah, it's not the most cost-efficient tank on its own now. No matter the metric, it now has to be used correctly to pay off for you, which is how tanks should be priced. M1A1 also went up 5 points. So yeah, the high-end NATO tanks not getting nerfed as much as the lower-end ones. So, or the mid-tier ones. So only 5 points here. The M48 went, or I think stayed at 55. I'm pretty sure that was somewhere in this range before. The Sheridan got 5 points cheaper. So, but the M48 now quite a bit cheaper than the Leo 1 series, so might be still really worthwhile taking in those decks that got them, like the 2nd Panzer Grenadier and the 5th Panzer. Now, if you really want to have a cheap option, Sheridan now went to 50 points from 55 points, which is a nice change as well. Yes, this has a really low rate of fire, it has a good amount of damage to infantry, and the ATGM is a nice, cool thing as well. The only ATGM in the tank on the NATO side, but the low frontal armor and the low rate of fire means that this thing needs to be cheap, otherwise it's pretty pointless. And then the M60 A3 went up to 100 points, so it's still on par with the Leo 1A5, which I would say is a bit worse then. So feel like the M60 should be slightly cheaper than the Leo, which means that the Leo either needs to go up to 105 or the M60 down to 95 points. Like either of these options I would currently be fine with. We might have to test it more to figure out which of those options is the better one. Because yes, it has slightly more frontal armor, but it is a good bit slower. It has less range, and it has less accuracy by a good bit. So in general, I would say the Leopard 1A5 is the superior tank. And we will get to another 100 point tanks that I also think is slightly superior to this and on par with the Leo 1A5 soon. And then we have the T62 series, the T34 and the BT76 being new tanks that we haven't had before, that we saw in the KDA division. And the T62M went down from 90 to 75 points. So a 15 point price decrease, which in this region is pretty big. So they went from being more expensive than Leos to being quite a 25 points cheaper than Leo 1A5s and 5 points cheaper than Leo 1A1s, with better penetration and better frontal armor, but quite a bit less rate of fire and a lot less accuracy and a lot less speed. So it makes sense that they are at this point. But if you can just like shoot out of cover onto Leos, you can still deal with them pretty well. You get the first shot and you hit with maybe 2 or 3 of them, you can for sure do a lot of harm to Leos. So these for sure now have a good spot in the Soviet lineup as the first responders and like the frontline unit. And they also are in the KDA division as the top end there though, which allows you at least to go somewhat on toe-to-toe with some of the NATO tanks, like on the lower end, or on the lower mid-end, like the Leo 1A1s, or being able to deal relatively efficiently with the M48 series, as these have trouble penetrating the T62, but the T62 can easily deal with them. But the rate of fire really being one of the biggest flaws of the T62 series. The other T62s also got slightly cheaper. T62M went from 100 to 90, and T62MV I think from 110 to 100. So these have an ATGM, which helps them out dealing with NATO tanks for sure. Though the accuracy on those like 900M, 9M117s is just a bit mediocre. 40% accuracy is really not reliable. But gun is the same as on the T60M1. And the MV even got some extra frontal armor, which helps a lot against all the mid-range NATO tanks. So it can tank a bit against Leos, it can tank pretty well against the M48A2 and the M60. So really nice tank lineups up as well. And I would say it's pretty much on par with the Leo 1A1, though based on completely different like strengths and weaknesses, which is how tanks should work, and that's pretty cool. And I would say it's, once more, slightly better than the M60. And on par with another 100-point tank, as there's 4 of these now that is still coming up. One more PACT tank on 100 points further down the line as well. T60B stayed at 200 points for now. On the previous build of the Alpha, this was a bit cheaper. It was on 185 points, the same price as the M1 Abrams. Feedback and changes on Eugen's end brought it back to 200. I would say it should go somewhere below this, but maybe a bit more expensive than the M1 Abrams, as it is a bit better, I guess. Though it has less accuracy, but it has more range, it has comparable speed, and it has the ATGM and the autoloader. So I guess it could go to 190 or maybe not 195 points. But there's another tank at 200 points that I think is way better than this. So yeah, T80B sadly unchanged. T80BV got 15 points cheaper, went from 240 to 225 points. So good change here. Nice buff to a tank that is really important in the 79th and 39th, as it is the tank to deal with all the medium tanks, to wipe the floor with them. And getting that a bit cheaper is pretty nice. So dealing with all the Leo 185s and trying to deal with the M1 Abrams, for example, as you have the perfect frontal armor to deal with it on longer ranges on this, is pretty key. So yeah, good change here. T80U stayed unchanged at 305 points. But I mean, it's a really good tank, so it doesn't really need to change. It's the heaviest boy in the Soviet arsenal. And its counterpart got 5 points more expensive on the other side. If you go down here, yeah, the M1A1HA went up to 310 points, so slightly more expensive. Maybe could go to 315 points, as the extra penetration and extra accuracy is still pretty key compared to the T80U, though the T80U has the advantage with the ATGM and the speed, so they're still pretty comparable, so there shouldn't be too much of a difference between these two, I guess, in the end. And then we come to the other 100-point tank in the Soviet arsenal, the normal standard T-72, which comes in the 7th Panzer Division. And that has a great penetration gun, good range, and good accuracy, and also good rate of fire, but it has less frontal armor than the T-62, and it doesn't have an ATGM. But it also is slightly faster, so it's really good 100-point tank. One of the best 100-point tanks. You only get 1 card of them though, so you can't spam them out, sadly. Or maybe you get 2? No, I think you only get 1 of these. So, but it is a really good 100-point tank, and maybe the best one now. Though, yeah, T-62M and Leo 1A5 ain't that bad either. Leo 1A1 now is at 70 points, at 80 points, going up from 60. So more expensive than the T-62 now, more expensive than the M48, more expensive than the T-55 AM now. So has a bit changed in its position in the food chain, but is still a pretty good tank as well, as it has high speed. But it doesn't quite have the stabilizer and accuracy of the 1A5. So the gun not quite as amazing, but still pretty good. Decent range and 50% accuracy, still not bad. So for 80 points, still somewhat worthwhile. And then the M1 IP was changed a bit before, has changed back to 200 now. And I think that's somewhat fine, though this is the tank I was talking about when I talked about the T80B. As the T80B, in my eyes, gets outclassed by it by quite a bit. As the M1 IP has 3 more frontal armor and has quite a bit more accuracy. 10% is a lot. And the extra speed is also nice. The T80B, to stay fair, gets the ATGM and gets the autoloader and 1 more penetration and a bit more range. but I still would say the M1 IP has the slight edge. So yeah, I would like to see the T80B go slightly in between the M1 IP and the M1 Abrams eventually. But for now, I think the balance across the board, as obviously not every unit has to be perfectly balanced against every other unit in a vacuum, they have to fit in divisions, is pretty good. All these tanks now have their use case and can do a good job for you, even if they might be slightly cost inefficient. They are not completely unusable anymore, or like really painful to use as some of the PACT tanks had been before. For example, the T-72s on their super high price compared to the Leo ones. So this should be pretty good. And yeah, that is the first step. And as you can see, that already took us quite a while to get through. And there's still more changes to come. And we will try to go through them now a bit quicker. First, one of them is logistics prices have been changed a bit. And availability curves have been changed a bit as well. So yeah. For example, these come all now with 3 availability. Some of the helicopters got cheaper as well and come in better availability. For example, the CH-53 now comes with 3 availability. I think these come with 2, and these come with 3 or 4 as well. I think they come with 3. So you now pay only pay the extra price for a bit mobility with supply instead of card and cost as well on these supply helicopters. So supply helicopters should be a bit more worthwhile. Supply trucks also are changed a bit in prices and efficiency and card numbers. So all of this is pretty cool. Then infantry prices have been changed in some regards as well. For example, the fire team units have been made cheaper. So these are a bit more efficient to use now. Then the West German Pioneer Flammenpatrone, which were by far the most cost-efficient CQC infantry, now went up to 55 points. Which may be a bit too much. I would like to see them at 50 points. They went up from 35 points. Yeah, it's a huge increase. I mean, they're still pretty strong when it comes to dealing damage to infantry. I just don't quite know if they're that cost-efficient in the deck anymore. Would like to see them maybe go to 50 points. Another change to the Germans is that the G3 lost a bit more accuracy, so German mainline infantry got nerfed a bit more still, but is still feeling pretty well, good. And then another change is that all the Motostalky Metis units, or all the Metis units, got 5 points cheaper, but on the other side, the ATGM of the NATO got a bit of a change as well, as Dragons 2s are now having real Dragon 2 stats, and Mega rifles and so on all using the Dragon 2 now, with the airborne with Dragons as well. Oh. Only the Engineer Dragons now using the Dragon 1, and the Dragon 2 is really capable with 19 penetration, as you can see here. Metis still has the range advantage, but not the penetration advantage anymore, but is cheaper now. Ultra with Metis also now only 55 points. And the Dragon engineers still use the old Dragon. So they are pretty cheap, but also only have a mediocre ATGM. I'm not quite sure if the Dragon might not be too good now for the amount of the units they come on. Maybe the mech rifles need to go up to 65 points, but we will see. And as I said, the fire teams all got cheaper, so the fire team Dragon now might be really nasty at 30 points. Maybe should go up to 35 points as well. But yeah, that will be shown over time. Panzer Grenadiers also got cheaper, just like the fire teams, as those smaller squadrons are otherwise relatively inefficient, and you pay a lot of extra price for the IFV they come in. And then 2 units that got more pricey as well are once the TOW 2 versions. They got 5 points more expensive. They are now 85 and 90 points, and for the Milan 2, the same thing. So ATGMs are a bit more pricey on the NATO side now for infantry, which is good. Otherwise, tanks would get too inefficient, as tanks already went up in price. So Otherwise, these TOW 2s would completely shred. And the NATO side has the better ATGMs, but now at least PACT has the advantage of having them cheaper and more spammable with their Conquerors, which only cost you 60 points. So quite a bit cheaper now than the NATO counterparts. Yeah, that's the infantry changes. And then mostly, maybe I missed one or two, but I think I got most of them covered. Then another bigger change is in the AA tab. For the Soviets, the Tunguska now is cheaper, only costing you 185 points. And there is a new Akula version. The Akula, Eugen realized that the Akula couldn't carry two guided weapon systems at once because they didn't have enough electronics in their pylons to have two guided weapon systems on their 4 pylons. So there is now one with E-glass and gun pods for 160 points. Still the most costly AA helicopter, but it's an Aquila, so that's pretty cool. And the normal Aquila version now carries a different weapon system. Instead of the E-glass, it now carries a couple of unguided rockets. They have 80mm, so it's a completely anti-ground system now, which is still really strong. And as you can see, it also got a really lovely paint job. This is a beautiful skin now, so we have 2 really cool skins for the Aquila. Numbers didn't really change much. You still get 2 of them in the helicopter tab. Only 1 card of the AA helicopter, and you only get 1 on that card. So you don't get way more KA-50s, just 1 more, but a new version, which is pretty nice. And that is it for these. I already went over the Rocket Mi-8 TV price reductions and the Mi-8 TB price reduction in the East German new division. But yeah, these went from 200 to 160 and from 210 to 175. So these are great price changes as well. And then we also have in the air tab a change to the Ginas, which now the cheapest one is a bit more expensive, and from 60 up to 85 points, the bomb one. You can't kill off helicopters as cheaply with the gun anymore. You have to pay 85 points now. But the rocket and the napalm one went a bit down in price, so they are not as overly expensive anymore. And the East German Su-22 napalm also went down from 300 to 255 points. So that is pretty nice. And a couple of recon units also got cheaper in price. The Razit went down to 30 points. And the BOs went down to 60 points. So there are some nice changes here. And one more tank change I nearly forgot is the East German tank. Not the right tanked, but BMPs got both 5 points cheaper. So West Germans really have a nice spam. But when it comes to divisions, there have been 2 changes made. And second Transgrenadier, you no longer get Fallschirmjägers. Here you still get Fallschirmjäger to Milan. I would expect that to go away as well, to nerf this division a bit. And you lost 1 card of Leo 2A3s and you got one more card of Leo 1A1s. So the tank tab is also quite a bit more different now in your choices compared to the 5th Panzer. But I'm not sure if the takeaway of the Fallschirmjägers was necessary. Let me know down below what you think about that, and let Eugen know as well if you think the Fallschirmjägers should stay in here, or if they were too strong for the Panzergrenadier deck. I'm a bit in between at the moment, but yeah, those are the changes here. And then in the 82nd, the other division that was heavily overperforming, they reduced the availability per card of some of the units at the moment. I think the Flash Engineers went down from 9 to 6. And the Airborne the Airborne TOW 2 went down to 3 availability, so you get less TOW per card. And then you also lost one M1 IP card, so you can't bring as many Abrams in this deck anymore. It really feels more like a airborne division now than a all-around good division that also has some higher level tanks. Like now you really only have this one card, somewhat on par with the 35th, which only gets one card of TADB. So that is a nice change as well, making this division a bit more nuanced and a bit more specialized and less of an insane all-rounder that it was before. So yeah, those are the balance changes. This is part 3. This is it with part 3 out of 4 over the Massena changes. But one more big thing is to come in the next video. So if you don't want to miss that, subscribe now. That one thing is a lot of new maps. And over those we will go in the next video, which should be a pretty long one as well. And yeah, you can see a lot of things coming with these patches. And I'm really hyped for Massena, that way around. And it might really be the best patch for Wano so far. And the one that really brings the joy back into this video game. For me at least. Like the alpha build is a lot of fun for me. And I can't wait to have some balanced PACT versus NATO games coming up. If that's it, see you all next time. Bye bye. And have a good day.